Jack Carter wiped his hands on an old rag as the winter sun dipped below the Montana horizon, casting long shadows across his dusty garage. At 39, he had spent more years fixing broken engines than he cared to count, yet his small-town shop was barely holding together. Bills piled up, and sometimes he wondered if it was worth the struggle. Still, he had a gift for repair, and despite the grease on his hands and the aching in his back, he found pride in helping people who came through his door needing something mended. That pride kept him going. One evening, the sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled his attention. A sleek black SUV rolled into the driveway, its polished surface shining under the fading light. It was the kind of vehicle rarely seen in their quiet town. From the driver's seat emerged Richard Grant, a wealthy man in his 50s, known for his stern demeanor and business empire. Jack recognized him immediately, though they had never met. Richard's face was stone as he walked around to the back, opening the door. Sitting there was Emily, his 16-year-old daughter, frail but striking, confined to a wheelchair that looked as worn as she did. Jack approached cautiously, curious but respectful. Richard's voice broke the silence, cold and sharp. "Fix this chair," he said, nodding toward Emily. Then, in a tone dripping with bitterness, he added, "If you can fix it, she's yours." The words echoed in the quiet garage, heavy and cruel. Jack froze, his brows knitting. He looked at Emily, who dropped her gaze to the ground, her hands gripping the chair's arms tightly. She didn't speak, but her silence told him everything. This wasn't the first time her father had treated her like a burden rather than a child. Ignoring Richard's heartless remark, Jack crouched beside Emily, speaking softly. "What's been giving you trouble?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet his. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she explained how the chair jerked when moving forward and the brakes often failed. Jack nodded thoughtfully, listening intently. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt heard. Richard stood nearby, arms crossed, uninterested in the exchange. Jack pushed the chair into his workshop, promising Emily he would do everything he could. As the night wore on, Jack worked with quiet determination. He stripped down the chair, checking every wire, bolt and motor. His hands moved skillfully, tightening screws and replacing worn-out parts. All the while he spoke to Emily, asking her about school, her interests and her dreams. At first, her answers were short, hesitant, as though she was unused to such kindness. But as the hours passed, she began to open up. She told him about how she loved painting, how she missed dancing, and how she longed to feel like herself again. Jack listened, offering encouragement, reminding her she was more than the chair she sat in. When he finally finished, Jack rolled the chair toward her. "Give it a try," he said with a smile. Emily hesitated, then gripped the controls. The chair moved forward smoothly, responding with precision. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in years, laughter spilled from her lips. She spun the chair around the garage, her joy echoing off the walls. Jack watched with quiet satisfaction, his heart swelling at the sight. Richard, however, remained unmoved, his expression unreadable as he muttered, "Well, you fixed it. Like I said, she's yours." Jack stood tall, his face hardening. He turned to Richard, his voice steady and firm. "She's not an object to give away. She's your daughter, and she deserves better than this." Richard scoffed, but said nothing. Emily stopped her chair and looked at Jack, her eyes shining with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, someone had stood up for her. In that garage, under the dim lights and the smell of grease, a spark of hope was lit, hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. Richard's words hung in the air like a cruel shadow, but Jack refused to let them define the moment. Emily sat quietly in her chair, her hands trembling on the controls, still processing the unexpected kindness she had just received from a stranger. For years, she had been reduced to a problem in her father's eyes, a constant reminder of imperfections he couldn't control. Jack, however, saw none of that. He saw a young girl with dreams, a bright soul who only needed someone to believe. In her, that difference, Emily realized, made all the difference in the world. Richard, impatient and cold, turned away, pulling out his phone as though the entire interaction bored him. Jack didn't let it pass. He leaned down, speaking gently. To Emily again. "You're stronger than you know," he said, offering her a reassuring smile. The words softened her expression, replacing fear with a flicker of hope. Richard scoffed from the corner, muttering about wasted time. Jack stood his ground, his voice rising with conviction. "You can't treat her like this. She deserves respect, not insults." For the first time, Emily saw someone stand up to her father, and it left her breathless. Emily's newfound freedom in the repaired chair gave her confidence. She tested the movements again, turning sharply, stopping smoothly, and even backing up without issue. Each successful motion brought more light into her eyes. For so long, her life had been filled with frustration, embarrassment, and silence. But in this moment, she felt alive again. She looked at Jack, her gratitude unspoken but clear. Richard noticed the connection growing between them and frowned. He had expected the mechanic to be simple, silent, and transactional. Instead, Jack treated Emily like a person of value, something Richard had forgotten how to do. The tension in the room thickened. Richard stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over Jack. "You've done your job," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "Don't think this means you're part of our lives." Jack wiped the grease from his hands, unfazed by the threat. He met Richard's glare head-on and replied calmly, "I don't care about your money or your power. What matters is that she feels human again." Emily's eyes darted between them, her heart racing. For years, she had been silenced by fear of her father's anger. Jack's courage gave her a glimpse of another way. In the days that followed, Emily found excuses to return to Jack's garage. Sometimes it was for small adjustments to the chair. Other times, it was simply to talk. She told him stories about the books she loved, the music she missed dancing to, and the dreams she thought she had lost forever. Jack listened patiently, treating her voice like it mattered. Slowly, the girl who had been hidden in the shadows began to shine. Richard disapproved, warning Jack to keep his distance. But Emily resisted her father's control for the first time, insisting she had the right to decide who she spoke with. One afternoon, as rain drummed on the roof of the garage, Richard returned in a fury. He accused Jack of interfering in his family, of filling Emily's head with nonsense. Jack stood his ground once more, not with anger, but with quiet strength. "She doesn't need less love," Jack said firmly. "She needs more, and if you can't give it, then someone else must." Emily's eyes welled with tears, realizing Jack was fighting battles on her behalf she had never dared to fight for herself. The words pierced Richard's pride, leaving him silent, his authority suddenly fragile. For Emily, that moment was transformative. She understood then that her life was not defined by her father's bitterness or her wheelchair. Jack had given her more than a repaired chair. He had given her the belief that she mattered. Slowly, Richard's grip weakened as he saw his daughter growing stronger in spirit, guided by the mechanic's unwavering kindness. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. For the first time, Emily felt hope for a future where she could dream, live and stand tall, whether on her feet or in her chair, because someone had reminded her she was worthy of love.